Hi, I'm Eli Krantzberg, and welcome to Session Keys ELECTRIC-R. The ELECTRIC-R is sampled from a vintage 1976 Fender Rhodes Mark I electric piano, and there are a variety of ways to modify the sound and tone in this plugin. To begin with, there are two completely unique sample sets, and we switch to them over here. Studio is a clean recording of the Fender Rhodes, and Live is a recording that brings out the warmth of the mids a little bit more. So let's listen to the same sample with both just to get an idea of the different quality of these two samples. Now the interface can be broken down into a few major sections. At the top here we have the sound section. We can choose between different presets here, and those presets are based on the tonality and effects settings in these two panels over here. And so we use this sound section here to load, create, name, and save different sound presets. Now underneath we have an Animator section over here which is used to play back musical phrases, and we can trigger them using key trigger notes. We have a piano section here with more controls for the tonality, plus we have the unique pentamorph, which is great for crossfading between different qualities of the samples that are used. We have a settings button over here with some global parameters, and we have a smart chord section which allows for one finger triggering of chords in various voicings and qualities that sit nicely in the range of the electric piano. The piano tab on the bottom offers a variety of ways to shape the sound. We have simple bass and treble controls to begin with that are very effective. And we can always command click to snap them back to unity values, and that's control click on Windows. We have a crunch control, which adds really authentic kind of crunchy distortion type quality that players get when they hit the keys harder. So use that for a bit more of an aggressive sound. And the response knob controls the dynamic range. When we turn it clockwise, we get a wider range between the quieter and louder notes, and turn it down for a shorter or thinner dynamic range, which is useful if you want it to sit in a mix with a bunch of other instruments. Now the pentamorph in the middle here is a really unique feature to Session Keys ELECTRIC-R, and it interacts with the settings in the tonality tab over here. We have a few different positions, and we can drag this puck around to morph between the different positions, or we can just click right on the names to snap to those positions. Now when we're in unplugged mode, we use only the samples of the tines without amplification, and it combines that with mechanical noises. Now tines are one of the defining characteristics of a Fender Rhodes piano. Basically, when you strike a key on a Rhodes, a rubber hammer strikes a thin rod that's connected to a tone bar, and that whole assembly is referred to as a tine. And in the tonality section, we have different parameters for controlling the sound of the tines. So this will blend that with mechanical noise, which indicates things like the sustain pedal, the noise the keys make when you release your fingers over here and when you strike with this knob over here. So with that in mind, that's what unplugged gives you. Original, when we snap or get to that position, are the original samples and all the settings in the tonality window here, except the reverse control over here, which adds a reverse envelope to the sound. Now when we go to tonality, over here at the top, it's the same as original. It's all of the samples with all the tonality settings, including reverse. When we go to unique over here, it's just the reverse samples and the mechanical noise, and reversed contain just the reversed samples. So we can get a wide variety of sounds simply by dragging this puck around. Let's look at the tonality section a little more closely. Now we have a resonance control here, which controls the level of harmonic resonances that are generated when you play with the sustain pedal. So let me show you an example with sustain notes all the way off and all the way on, so you can hear the richness of the harmonics that are generated. This is with it off. So it's kind of a thicker, richer, resonant quality to the sound, and you can set it where you want there. Now this volume knob affects the level of the acoustic unamplified tine sound. And you'll notice when I move the pentamorph down to unplugged, it'll increase this parameter, and other parameters are affected at different positions here, of course, like that. So as we move it down, we get more of the volume of the tines. And the position changes the virtual distance between the tine and the pickup that's used to run it through an amplifier section. And this can really influence the timbre and quality of the sound. Let's put this back to original, and you'll hear as I dial this the effect it has on the sound. So it's much darker when it's turned clockwise, and when it's turned counterclockwise, it's almost as if it's generating harmonics an octave higher. Attack is used to delay how long it takes for the samples to reach their full amplitude, so you can get the effect of kind of like fading in a note. And decay will truncate the natural sustain. Now the mechanical noises here are controlled with these three knobs. This will increase the sustain pedal noise. This is note on noise. And this is note off noise. So you can get as much or as little of these mechanical noises as you want. Now reverse, in order to hear this, we need to be in the tonality mode here, or unique or reversed. But it allows a reverse sound to be added to the envelope of a note. And we can increase or decrease it, of course. ELECTRIC-R includes up to 7 very musical sounding effects that work great with electric piano. Now I've chosen a very simple, dry, neutral sounding preset with everything off, and here's a simple part completely unaffected. Tremolo, our first effect, is used to modulate amplitude, meaning the volume of a sound, and pan. And we can control the two separately. We can sync to tempo when this button is enabled, and we can set the rhythmic value here. And for panning, we can have a separate unique value if we want. We control the balance of the amount of amplitude modulation and pan modulation with this fader over here, so we can blend as much or as little of each as we want. When retrigger is enabled like that, the envelope or shape that's used gets re-triggered every time a new note is hit, and when it's off, it just goes through the cycle based on the rhythmic values we have set here. Depth controls the intensity of the modulation, and the shape can be morphed continually between a smooth-sounding sine wave and a square wave, which is a kind of on-off type of signal. So lots of nice, interesting effects are possible. Chorus is our next effect, and this basically creates copies of the input signal and modulates the phase and the time. Depth, again, controls the intensity of the modulation applied to those copies. Speed is the rate that we hear the copies, how close together they are, and phase is like an offset. And we can mix the wet and dry signal with this knob over here, so we can get everything from a rich, thickening sound to a really affected, kind of underwater, garbled kind of sound. Next is a phase modulation filter type effect, the phaser. What this does is it splits the signal into two pathways. One is left unchanged and the other is processed by multiple stages of all-pass filters, and that alters the phase of the signal, and they're blended together. Depth controls the intensity of the modulation. Speed is how fast it's generating those copies and feeding it through, and the phase determines the phase offset of those copies, and feedback is a really powerful knob and control in phasers, and what it does is it feeds back the processed signal, the filtered signal, back into the signal pathway so we can get it oscillating over and over again. And there's a dry wet knob. So that'll feed it back in and really create interesting, more dramatic effects. And this can also be assigned to the pentamorph so that the parameters are modulated as this is moved. I'm going to leave this active and move to the amp section, and this allows us to overdrive the signal and get a kind of distortion. It adds to the crunchy effect. We have some simple 3-band EQ and a master output level, so we can really drive the input and bring the master down if you want an overdriven type of sound. Let's listen to another example. So you can get a really nasty type of overdriven sound if you want. We have standard compression over here with threshold, ratio, attack, release. There's a makeup gain and a mix knob for parallel compression, very useful and musical. And the delay is really nice as well. We can generate rhythmic delays based on the tempo and also assign that to the pentamorph. We can dampen each of the iterations as they're generated, and we can create a feedback so that they are additional delays or repeats added. And again, we have a mix knob to blend dry and wet. So very nice and suited to the Rhodes. We have a reverb effect with some drop-down presets that we can choose from and a mix knob, very simple to use. We can also scroll using these next previous parameters, and as well we can assign that to the pentamorph so that the values change as we drag the puck around like that. So once you've shaped the sound that you like using the effects parameters and the tonality settings, we can save it as a preset. Just click the plus button, enter a name over here, hit OK when you're done, and it will appear at the bottom of the drop-down menu. And to get rid of it, just hit the X. Smart chords are turned on over here, and they allow you to play musically correct chords by simply triggering a single note either on a keyboard or with pads. Now we set the root key over here, and we can choose between any of the 12 keys, and we set the quality of the chords that are to be used here based on a major scale, minor scale, dominant, seventh, or Dorian. So for example, in C major, if I hit a C note, I'll get a C major chord. Hit a D and I'll get D minor, etc. All the way up the scale notes, we'll get the tonalities and harmonies that pertain to that key signature. Now if I switch, let's say to F major, if I hit C, I'm going to get the F major chord. So C is always used as the root chord for whatever you have selected here. And if we open the keys pop-up, you'll see here that it's reflected in the display. So if I hit the C note, I get an F major chord. If I hit G, for example, I'll get the C. Now the black notes can be used to modify the voicing. C sharp will give us the first inversion. D sharp is the second inversion. We can get a sus4 with the F sharp. We get a seventh chord with G sharp. And that'll be either major 7, minor 7, or dominant 7, depending which note of the key you're using. And the G sharp gives us the ninth chord. And we can use these modifiers down low to give an extra octave in the bass, or a fifth in the bass. We can humanize the timing of the notes. When we dial this up, we get random delays between the notes that are generated to create the chords. So instead of them all sounding at once, they'll be spread out a little bit. It's very subtle, but it gives a bit of humanization. The UI velocity knob determines what velocity is triggered when we click these with a mouse. And similarly, the octave button here determines which octave these are triggered in when clicked with the mouse. Now we can switch to pad assignments over here. And when you're using a machine pad from Native Instruments or other pads, you can use the buttons to trigger the chords here, and these correspond to the keys in the scale that is set over here. So for example, if I switch D, we'll see the chords are updated. And we trigger the equivalent of the black notes with these notes that are assigned to these top rows on the pads. We can use MIDI learn to reassign these. This will flash, hit a note on your pad, and it'll be reassigned. And as soon as you do that, the next one will flash, and so on until they're all assigned. And you can always reset the default machine mapping using that. And you need to be in pad assignment mode here. We get to the Animator at this bottom tab over here, and we turn it on with this button. It's an adaptable MIDI piano phrase player that contains pre-programmed phrases that we see in the browser here, and they're grouped into songs that we see in this section of the browser. And you can use your own chords, and you can also mix and match the different phrases from the different songs together. Now, we have a couple of different sections here. This is the song section on top, and we can load different songs in from this drop-down menu. And you'll notice that as I'm loading songs, the sounds are changing, and that's because of this link mode. If we find a sound that we like, we can disable the link mode, and then we can change songs and leave the sound set as is. But I'll link them up for now. When we set up a custom song, we can save it with the plus button, name it, just like we did with the sound set, and use X to delete it, and we can scroll next and previous with these buttons over here. Now the phrase selector contains the songs over here, and as we click on each song, we see the different phrases contained within each song. And in this browser, whatever is selected here, if we double click on it, it'll replace the currently selected note, and that's how you customize songs. So I'm going to call up one of the preset songs here, and as I play a note on my keyboard, it'll play the phrase that I have selected here based on that root note. And if you look in the chord detection area here, you'll see that if I play multiple notes, it'll take my voicings and my chords and play these phrases with them. So the idea is that we trigger these different phrases either in the lower range of our controller or by using the mouse, and we can play different patterns with different chords. And each of these phrases has 3 different degrees of complexity, and we can switch between them here with this mouse, or we can use a mod wheel, and you can see a representation of my mod wheel here as I move it. You'll see that it changes the complexity, and we can do that in real time. The velocity of the notes that are generated can be determined either by note velocity or by the pitch bend wheel. And you can see a representation here as I move my pitch bend wheel. You'll see that I'm dialing in more of the velocity based on pitch bend. And we can also determine the velocity by clicking and dragging this positioner over here to determine the blend between pitch bend and key velocity. We can add swing to the phrases, we can quantize the phrases, we can play them at double time or half time. And we can even use smart chords simultaneously and play one note, have it voice a chord for us, and have the phrase play based on those chords. So that's Session Keys ELECTRIC R. Enjoy.